Welcome to the Studio Meala podcast. I'm your host, Owen O'Donnell. Joining me, as always, is the wonderful Sean Cunningham.
Hello. Hi, Owen. Love you.
He's a little froggy.
Yeah, I've got a little bad throat today. I'm a little sicky boy.
We apologise for any frogs that make it in. But frogs aside, very exciting to have a guest today. That's awful. It's very exciting to have a guest today. Okay. Our guest today, very exciting. It's Worthikids.
Hello.
Woo! For people who might not know, but come on, get on board.
Look, if you're online in any kind of animation circles, be it an animator yourself or a fan of animation online, you've seen this guy's stuff. And excellent it is. Just a couple of hits. You got Captain Yajima. You got Hatbox Troubles. You got Dried Up Old Bones. And of course, already mentioned, but BIGTOP Burger, the runaway success story. We're going to get into it. Don't worry, folks. Calm down.
I was about to hit a soundboard button, but I was like, no, I really need to rein myself in and just not do that instantly. Everyone within the studio are such big fans and are always just constantly referencing your stuff or quoting your videos or, even going, how do I learn Blender? I'll just watch one of Worthikids' videos.
Don't watch mine. They're not good tutorials. There are a lot of other better ones.
I like tutorials that are like, well, this is just what I do. That's I feel like I learn more from those ones rather than like the clinical ones. But yeah, so we're really excited to have you on board. It's on board, as if we've hired you on the podcast.
It's great to be here. I can't wait to get started. What's the first shot I got to animate? Where am I starting?
I'm delighted with how little you are willing to take to work here.
Yeah.
You need this podcast animated live.
Oh, no.
The whole thing. That brings me into something I kind of wanted to kind of kick off with, which was a lot of your earliest work in I can't remember when you started posting, 7 or 8 years ago on YouTube, something like that.
There are videos before that are all unlisted. I started posting in 2010, I want to say.
Amazing. Oh, wow. But a lot of your, the earliest stuff you can go back and find is either, podcast audio or existing audio, like something from the Eric Andre show, and just reacting to the audio, making an animatic and just animating kind of in a linear kind of way. That start obviously worked really well for you, but it seems to have kind of seeped into how you make your current stuff, because there's almost a kind of stream of consciousness energy to a lot of your cartoons. Is that how it feels for you?
I've never thought of it that way. I think you're right. I think I had that thought at some point that I was I'm animating podcast clips. Maybe I could have the audio to my shows kind of sound like a podcast, sort of. I'm not sure I did that with a lot of intention, though. It was more just that's funny to me. That's funny audio. So I want the audio to sound like that.
With say moving into your original cartoons, then what's your process like? Do you script, or do you just kind of record ideas vocally, or?
It depends if it's just me or if there needs to be more voices. If it's just me, I don't script anything. I usually just crack open Audacity, have a voice in my head, and I'm like, okay, this character says this, and then I'm what's the response? And I try and record the response right afterwards. So you have to play it from the start every time, right, and listen.
Yeah.
And then I layer it like that until it reaches a certain length, and I'm like, it's done. But with BIGTOP Burger, I had to script that because there's a lot of people involved. So I wrote out a bunch of lines.
That makes more sense. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I mean by the stream of consciousness thing, because it sounds so freeing to have that process of just I'm just going to record myself talking, then I'm going to make the animatic, and I'm going to animate that.
It's a lot of fun. I haven't done it for a while because I've been working on BIGTOP, but I have more stuff on the way, which is exactly that. They're much shorter things that are just me riffing off of me like I used to do, just track after track after track. It's a lot of fun.
Going back to the earliest stuff, the Eric Andre stuff and the Always Sunny clips and stuff, was that Blender back then as well that you used to work in?
No. So I did the 2D element, or what you see, the animation element is done in Flash, an old version of Flash that I had before they made it a subscription. It was really old.
Yeah.
And what I would do is I would export that out as an image sequence, as a bunch of PNGs, and then pull that into Blender on a transparent plane, and so it would play back the footage. And the only reason I did that is I knew the compositing tools in Blender better than Flash. I don't know if Flash has compositing tools.
Yeah.
It's awful. And I could put it over backgrounds easier, because if you import images in Flash, it comes in as like this crusty JPEG. At least it used to. It was a horrible program.
Yeah.
So I was trying to work around Flash, and I was using Blender to help me. And then Blender released the grease pencil where you can draw directly in it, and I was like, well, I'm never going back to Flash.
I remember seeing the Always Sunny clip, the Charlie one, like when it came out, and I can't remember what I was doing at the time, but I remember that being such a like, I could just mix software together and just have a thing be a 3D thing and float around. And it's so funny, like even when you go back to that, you can almost see just you playing with that just for the fun of it. Like there's so many moments in your early videos where it'll end with just like a zero gravity joke where characters are just suddenly floating. It
starts floating away.
Yeah. And I just remember at that time myself, like when I made early cartoons, I've got this new tool I kind of want to try. I'm just going to have the character like float or whatever. And it's just funny because it happens and kind of nothing else. And I don't know. It works really well.
You can see a definite example of that in Palpatine's journey when he falls down the chute. I was like, I want to mess with rigid body simulation. So I want him to go like, I didn't animate him bouncing on the chute. I wanted to just simulate a rock basically falling. Yeah. And so I did that just for the joy of it. And I remember laughing so hard at every attempted simulation because they all looked a little different, right? You change the angle.
Yeah.
And all of them are so funny because it's a little man bouncing around like with his arms out.
It's great to see tools in these programs being used like that, because they eventually become such a iconic part of, when you think about Flash animations where a character would flip or really, really awful tween motion.
Yes, yeah, I was gonna say the tweens.
That is in a sense bad, but also
it's signature of the program. Yeah,
you wouldn't change any of those things for a world now. Like those,
no.
That's like a beautiful thing. So to see that that's continuing with newer programs is still wonderful. And of course, we all remember the lens flare epidemic in the early days of Photoshop, which now, of course, I mean, I just said lens flare to you. You both, I could see in your eyes all the halcyon days, just wonderful. I could turn any image into a professional production with just one click. But yeah,
I remember that one tweening effect. Like one of my favorite animation jokes still are the episodes of Homestar Runner. Whenever it was like the cheat was making his own cartoons in Flash, and it was just that constant like, where you would have one photograph turn into an entirely different image, and it's just this ridiculous way the image algorithmically figures out to get over there. It's so funny.
I wanted to thank you for your contribution to the Austin Powers revival, like the sort of reassessment, because my faith was never tested. All these years I was always like, Austin Powers is funny, and no one there was a long gap.
There was. You're absolutely right. I know
no
what you're talking
one
about.
would agree, and now
it's because it got so popular,
now,
right? They made 3 of them, and I think people were sick of it, and people kind of lost sight that like the first movie's very good. It's very funny. It's solid.
Yep.
And he's back now.
In a big way.
I want to say about that animation, that one we were just talking about testing technology. That was a test. I made that to test out the BIGTOP technology because
it's
the BIGTOP. He's a 3D model with pieces drawn on, and he kind of animates around. And I wanted to do that specifically to test it, so I would know what to do or what not to do for BIGTOP. And I just made that on a whim, I guess, because I was thinking about Austin. But
I don't think I ever would have guessed it, going off that clip alone, that there was anything 3D going on.
The trick is you have to know how lazy I am. If you look at Austin's shirt, it has a complex pattern on it that would be awful to animate, so I don't.
This could be the big comeback of tartan in animation. We can finally have
patterns
tartan
and shit.
designs. Yeah.
I mean, I think like one of the ways it blends so successfully, like the way you use 3D models in like Big Top Burger and in the Austin Powers thing. Like, I think the reason it doesn't stand out to a lot of people is because what's nice is you still strip back the amount of poses. Like, a lot of stuff is either animated on like 3s or 4s, or just instantly popping into new poses with no in between at all.
I try to animate it as if I had drawn it to the best of my abilities, thinking like, well, I would put an in between here, so I'll put one there, but I wouldn't put one there, so I won't.
Yeah. It's again one of those things that like I talk to a lot of people about. It's something we do a lot as well, is like forced, like working against the technology almost, that like we do a lot of. So say with camera moves, and like we're working with our editor on a shot and he's got these smooth camera moves, and then I'm asking like, is there a way we can put the camera moves on 2s? Like, I know to you that's like a nightmare, but it would look cool if it was just a little kind of worse.
It's so important though, because I see a lot of old like puppeted animation done in Flash where I'm like, this would look 10, 20 times better if you just cut some of the frames. Like, why is it all on 1s as they tween around, right? It's like, why? I mean, because I guess why not? But it's like, you get rid of those frames, it looks so much better. I don't know why people love 1s.
It was used to great effect in the Lego movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
That whole film could have looked a lot, quote unquote, better or smoother.
Yeah.
But by just making them just that little bit jerky, it
looks so much better.
Yeah. And the Hotel Transylvania films are actually a kind of good example of using those 2D fundamentals to the advantage, because like a problem that a lot of 3D animation, that's not a problem, it's just different styles, but when they're puppets that when everything is really fluid, you lose some of that like great animation appeal. And of course so much comedy, especially in those films, comes from those snap poses that like from Dexter's Lab onwards, that are just, it's so much better than if like any of these characters moved into those poses to make those same in spot.
Absolutely. I lost my thought. It was something.
I mean, we'll all just agree that is good when that happens.
We're just all sitting in awe of the Hotel Transylvania series.
Yeah,
they should make 100 more of those.
The fun thing with Big Top Burger is it's the complete opposite of 2D animation in terms of what I'm trying to achieve, where I feel like if I'm doing something in 2D, I am trying to draw as like 3-dimensionally as possible. I'm trying to make the in-betweens really smooth, because I don't want like, you know, the kind of shabby jerkiness of like, oh, that arc looks really dirty, I should move it to match. I'm always trying to make it look as smooth as possible. Oh, with a 3D, it's completely flipped, where by default it is perfect. Completely perfect, and it looks bad, and you have to add in all these mistakes. Or it's like, I often do like with the characters' heads, if they're in one pose and they're another pose, I'll make sure the pose in between, I just like stretch the head in some weird way just to mess with the what do you call it, the volume, right? Because it would be wrong if I was drawing. I know it would be. I wouldn't draw it perfectly, and so it looks a little better in the movement because it's all wonky in the middle.
It's about getting your thumbprint in there.
Yes.
You know.
I mean, I'm probably a broken record. I think I've probably said this about 100 times in the podcast, but like my favorite thing to do still is like on a finished composite of a piece of work, whatever, is just going, can we just take that whole video now and put the entire video on the timeline? I'm just going to scribble on random frames to make it look like somebody's just thrown it into a shredder and then put it back together again.
Yeah, it's great.
Question on Instagram from Brobex Rebecca, who's actually one of our storyboard artists and was on the podcast. Hey Rebecca,
friend of the show.
What were your stylistic inspirations for Captain Yajima? And also love your stuff, she says. Which is
Thank you. So the stylistic inspirations for Yajima were pretty simple. I remember them. It was very lined up. The first inspiration was the dubbing studio, Rashame, who did all the voices. They had sent in this Japanese dub of Big Top Burger that they just did of their own accord. It's like of. They just do that and send it out to people to try and get the word out because they're trying to get off the ground. And I thought that was so cool. And I was like, not enough people are watching this. They're not hearing this great dub. I should make a cartoon that's originally in Japanese, so people can be exposed as like the first iteration, right? This is the default version of it.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to think of any project I could do that could utilize the team, and I had at that point I was thinking a lot about sci-fi stuff, like old sci-fi, like the first Star Wars movie or Star Trek the original series. I was like, what if I combine some of that with old like Japanese TV, sci-fi TV stuff like Kamen Rider, kind of aesthetically. And so I tried to put those together, and I tried to think of what characters could star in it. And my first idea was, I was like, well, a very famous kind of 70s sci-fi star is Barbarella, of course, who has a certain look. And a character design I love, not a character I love, but a design I love, is Jabba the Hutt. So I was like, what if it's like a kind of Barbarella space lady and then Jabba the Hutt? But he's like a genius. He's like really nice and smart, and he just has that design because it's a fun way to look. And so once I had those two characters, that was basically it. I'm like, well, I can write the short now. And then as I was writing it, Zoga appeared. I'm like, well, I need a villain.
That's incredible. I love when like the explanation for why something turned out the way it was like, well, I like this thing and I like this thing, so I just made them both that, and then I like this.
That's
other thing,
all
so
of my ideas. All I do is just take other ideas and go, I like that. I'll just change it. The thing that surprises me is people don't seem to notice. I never saw any comments saying, oh, he's kind of like Jabba the Hutt. People don't connect the dots, I don't think, because he's blue or he has multiple arms. There's enough little changes that it's like, well, he looks like a couple things. Even though he's really just that. It's a big slug man. It's the one idea.
I'd say that like there's more stuff out there, like even like big blockbuster movies that more than people are willing to admit just came about that way. And I think they always come out in a way where people don't notice what the influences are, because after enough of a process it just
of creating
becomes a new thing.
It morphs, and you're combining several ideas together sometimes, so it kind of warps around.
I'm sorry, Ian, but the Lucasfilm lawyers, they've heard you, and it's over.
No,
you were dead.
You should have kept it on the DL. So
the thing is, they can't sue me because I don't have the rights to Count Yajima in my own mind. Whenever people ask, like, could you do merch of Yajima? I'm like, I can't do that. I don't have the rights. And then I have to sit there. I'm like, what do I mean by that? And I'm like, well, in my mind, it was made in the 70s in Japan by a bunch of fictional animators, so I imagine. I didn't make this. They did. Like, I had that in my head the whole time I was animating. I remember an astronaut is wearing, like, a big visor, and I made sure to rig the model so that the visor would shake around every time I changed the face expression, because I'm like, well, they have to remove the visor and then like use tweezers to move the like little eyeball piece around. They have to put the visor back on so the visor move, and I'm like, this is such a pain. Those poor guys. Oh, it's horrible. Anyway, and then I'm back to animating.
So you've basically created two universes making this like that one piece of work, because you like created the studio and the people in the studio in your head, and then they are making the thing.
And it's really hard.
Yeah, that sounds hard. That sounds.
It's hard for them. It's not hard for me, thankfully. Like, they have to balance the little models. One of the hardest shots for fictional animators is that this big alien shoots a laser blast and a bunch of smoke comes out, and the smoke is supposed to be made of like puffed up like stuffing, but all the stuffing needs to be on strings so you can manipulate it and kind of animate the stuffing look like an explosion. And I'm like, this is easy, but I know they're suffering. This is so hard. This would be impossibly difficult to like move each piece around.
And it's probably so hot in there. They don't even have windows in the studio.
But that's what made it so fun. That's the part I love, is the the fiction of it, especially with the stop motion stuff, because I'm always thinking like, well, I know what that's made of. That's supposed to be this material, so I need to try and make it look like that, or like this. I know where they got this from, or like they need to pose the character like this.
Thinking about it in those terms is probably why it's ended up looking quite so convincing. Because it'd be one thing to think, oh, I'd like to make something that looks like that, and then to do it, and but to take that one step further and say, I'm going to do it, but really think I am in the studio, I am looking at a physical set, and what would have to happen between each shot, and that's going to lead to all those little touches that just bring. I mean, gotta say, Captain Yajima is my favorite thing that you've done. I was blown away by how visually convincing that was.
I'm
like,
really happy to hear that, because it's not one of my best performing animations. It does all right, but it's nothing crazy. And it's long, and a lot of work went into it. I'm so glad anybody likes it.
I'm a fan of Starfleet, which I think was originally called X Bomber in Japan, but that's like a marionette.
Oh yeah, I've heard of this. Yeah.
And it reminds me so much of that, and just like even just things like the lighting and just the tone of it. So it was just a delight for me watching that, and just it felt like I can't believe anyone is making anything that's anything like that now. So
yeah,
because it seems like such a lost art.
It was so fun to make. It was some of the most fun I've had working on an animation, because when I'm animating each shot, right, I don't see it the way it actually looks. I'm looking at these grayscale blocky models and I'm posing around, and then I render it, and I used a render farm which renders it for you at like 100 times the speed, right? Because they have supercomputers or whatever. And so I would send the shot out when it was done, like fingers crossed, I hope it looks good. And then I get it back, and every single shot is a present. It's like a gift, because I'm like, ooh, it's come to life suddenly, right? Because if I've got the lighting right, it'll look pretty good, and then it'll be like, woo, and it's come to life. And it was every single shot. It was so fun.
That's amazing. I like that. That's kind of my experience now because I don't do a lot of compositing myself anymore. Like, we'll be in the studio, and that's kind of my experience with handing off shots now. Like, giving a bit of a brief, it's like, we want to look like this, this, and this, but, you know, we'll trust you to kind of have your own eye on it. And like, yeah, getting the shots back and going, it's like you didn't make it anymore in a fun way. It's like you didn't make it anymore. You're just like, oh, look at this. This is cool. That just looks nice.
I am constantly chasing that feeling. It's hard to do it when it's just you, to like trick yourself into being surprised by the work.
Yeah.
The rendering is something that helps with that. With BIGTOP Burger, it's like there's nothing. I know what it's gonna look like, and then it looks like that. It was kind of there's no treat for it, unfortunately. It's just like
you heard it here first, folks. There's nothing. He gets nothing out of BIGTOP Burger.
He does it for you, and it kills him to do it. But that's a gift for you, not for him.
Yeah. In his own head, when he's making BIGTOP Burger, the imaginary studio that's suffering is just him. And,
that's true. That's true. And I am suffering hard. BIGTOP Burger, the system is old. The system is very old, and it is an enormous pain to use. One of the questions I had was, how'd you develop that like wiggly line style? I really love how you do these like really wiggly, shaky lines. And I'm like, I don't do those on purpose. Those are an artifact of how BIGTOP Burger works. I need all of the line art to be able to shimmer, right? So I have a bone that I can move around, which adds this kind of shimmery effect. But it's on all the time. So when I draw a line, a perfectly smooth looking nice line, it draws it and then it wiggles it. Yeah. As soon as I'm done, because the modifier gets applied. And that's every single line. I'm just like, I need it because it sells the look for the shimmers, but it's not my lines. I can draw smoother than that.
It's again, but that's such another great example of someone else just seeing that and being like, "Oh, that looks so great. How do I do that?" And like probably going about it a different way, just like physically drawing it that way. And,
some of the stuff I've seen kind of freaks me out a little, or get tagged on Instagram with someone they've like drawn a BIGTOP Burger like fan art, but they've really like more like done a study of like one of the frames from the show, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, that's weird, because like they've included lines that are not my lines, they are artifacts of the model. So like someone's ear is like bending in a weird way, and they've drawn it because they're like, that's what it looks like on the screen. But I'm like, don't do a study, don't learn that. That's not like artistic. It's a mistake. It's the model glitching.
I wonder if that's how it feels to like you know, game devs who worked mostly in the 90s, seeing people now making low poly stuff.
Yeah.
And making stuff with PS1 artifacting and stuff like that. It's amazing when those like frustrations that you have become like what is part of the package for the other people.
True. I don't know. I'd love to hear from them, or even like the musicians who had to use the really simple like music samples, which I think still sound amazing, the arranged samples, but like, are they embarrassed by that? Is that like, oh, that's nothing, that's bad? I have no idea.
Yeah. just a question on Twitter from the GSTR. But how do you approach sound, foley, and things like that? Do you make your own sound effects? Do you use digital sound effects? Do you record a lot of them yourself, or what's your process?
So, the foley is a step near the end I do on every single short, and I do it the traditional kind of foley way, where you're recording yourself live in sync with the animation. You're kind of performing along, right, with shoes on the floor or whatever.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I used to have a cardboard box filled with rocks and dirt, and I would just put a shoe in it and shift it around, kind of kick the dirt. It really doesn't sound good, and I don't want to do it anymore. I want to use maybe a big mat that has a bunch of rocks on it, and you can just step on it, because that would sound way better. But you have to find the space for that. It's kind of a pain.
Yeah.
The sound effects, I do make those myself. Well, it's a mix between a big sound pack I got years ago, which is the Hanna-Barbera sound effects pack. It was a big investment, but I needed it because those are all the types of sounds I want. And I was chasing a very specific sound as well that they used to use, which was in the sound pack. But if I'm not using that, I try and record it or make it myself.
Yeah. Even synthesized ones, any kind of little boop noise, things like that.
Those are all pretty much all of them are the same synth in FL Studio. I use a synth called Citrus, which comes with the program, and it lets you manipulate the sound in a bunch of ways. And I do that for the boop and for the and with the 80s anime sounds.
Yeah.
Because all of those are white noise with a bunch of filters on it, and they're tweaking the filters on their synths. It goes.
Yeah, you just do it a bunch of times. You get 6 different sounds. You go, that one works. I guess that kind of sounds like someone smiling. We'll make that.
Yeah.
Sticking with audio, you also do music, right?
Yes.
And I was curious. Something that I found through doing this podcast was that so many animators also seem to be musicians.
I've noticed that too.
Now, why do you think that is?
That's a great question. I have no idea. You'd have to ask the other animators. I know my story of how I got into music. It's nothing to do with animation. Although I've been doing music about as long as I've been animating, but they're completely unrelated. I got into music for a different reason than I got into animation. I don't know why they would be linked. It's very odd. One idea is they're both time-based art, right? It's an illustration is a single piece that you can see all the time.
Yeah.
A song, you listen through it, and it's seconds of time. An animation is the same. You have to play through it. So maybe there's something appealing about the time-based art that makes you want to do music too. I have no idea.
I do find myself communicating with musicians the same way I communicate with particularly editors and animators, where so if I'm ever at a rehearsal or something and I need to express an idea, I'm usually just saying it's good, you just kind of, and then or you go da da da. You're gesturing with your hands and making the noises without using words, and I do that a lot with editing feedback, where you're trying to express the feeling of something, but there's literally no word for it other than the noise you're making vocally. And I guess there's some connection there. It's they're kind of two of the mediums where
rhythm seems to
rhythm
matter
is a big part of it. Yeah,
for both of them.
Yeah, it must be something like that. I also wonder if when this question comes up, we interview a lot of animators who just make their own stuff, kind of mostly make their own stuff, and I think there must be a connection there with people who just are into making things from scratch themselves. I feel
yes.
Music is one of the most accessible versions of that, or something.
Yes,
I don't know.
And I think there is a drive, if you're doing all the animation yourself, to be well, I know what I want musically. I'm already doing all the animation myself. Why don't I try to make the music myself too? And maybe that's how a lot of people get into it. Just kind of know what I want. I'll just give it a go.
I can't help but interpret that as a bunch of animators worldwide going, do you know what? Well, I'm already doing everything myself. I'll do the music too. I guess I'll just do everything then, because nobody else is helping. Fine. No. I'll learn how to do music. No, yeah. I'll learn how to play the piano. Why not? I'm already drawn 100 fucking pictures of a rat.
For me, it's very based in selfishness, because it is fun to make the music for me, and I'm like, I could give this to someone else and they'd have a lot of fun composing it, or I could have all the fun for myself, so I'm gonna do it. It's just so addicting to be like, I want a song here, I could try and license a song, or wouldn't it be fun to write it? It's actually the way I write most of my music. I don't typically sit down and just write a song because I'm like a singer-songwriter, I'm like feeling the vibe. I don't do that. It's always like, this cartoon calls for a song, and that is exciting. I'm like, well, let me try and make that exact song that it's calling for, and then I can put it in.
Yeah.
You know, I think you've just helped me get over a personal problem with that lovely description, because I tend to beat myself up for being what I would call a control freak. I'm very much like, I want to do it because I feel like, well, I know how to do it right. I'm going to do it right. And I keep telling myself, oh, stop being such a control freak. But if you put it in terms of, this is a lot of fun, I know what I want to do, and I'm going to enjoy doing it, that's so much better a way to look at it than to think that it's some sort of defect. Like a character defect. So what I'm saying is, I'm going to get a whole lot worse, but in a positive way.
But you'll be having a lot of fun at the same time.
Well, but I'll be having fun.
Yeah.
I wanted to get this question in there, and I think I know the answer, from Pseudofolio on Twitter, who says, why clowns?
Why clowns? Okay, I think we should skip this one, because I'm going to answer this in the video, and it's going to take me like half an hour in my Q&A
Well,
video.
okay. I was expecting that to be one of your, just because I like clowns.
I actually don't. I'm not a big clown guy, so that's kind of the complexity of it. But
Incredible. Well, everybody look forward to someday that question being answered.
What I was hoping for, though, is at some point you give us a crumb of BIGTOP Burger lore, like an exclusive. It doesn't matter how completely inconsequential it is, but just something so that we get to feel like, wow, if you didn't listen to the Studio Meala podcast, you wouldn't have found out about this.
So a piece of lore that won't show up later, right? Not, you don't want like something that'll be in season 3. It has to be only available here, right?
Yeah, you can just make something up right now, but it is canon.
Yeah, because you have
Forever.
said it's canon, it is now canon.
Okay, I'll just pick something. I don't know if I'll stick by this. I mean, I'll have to now. I've seen people ask, like, where did Steve get his food truck? Did he like buy it? I think he made it. Whatever that means, he made the truck.
No, that's good.
I mean,
that
that's
as
a
open
lot.
as that needs to be, yeah.
That's a lot bigger than I was expecting. I thought we were going to get like someone's sock color is this. We'll never know, but that's a fact. But no, that's, well, I'll happily take that. So now we can put in brackets huge revelations revealed.
You'll never believe this. Oh,
This
he made the truck.
changes everything. It's a whole new show. I rewatched it since finding out. It's a whole new show.
I was going to say what this opens the floodgates for is fans now bringing in fan art of all the possible ways someone could possibly make a truck, whether that be finding the parts or like melting down something else and morphing it into, or just using magic or whatever. So just keep all of your lore drops that broad, and like you never have to give everything away. Question here from Mutton Sauce that says, while it is a fantastic choice for a clown planet to have their entire culture centered around the Cats musical, what was the reason for picking that?
I think this will come up in the Q&A video as well, I believe. I'll go through like the timeline of why that happened, but
I mean, you've got a cat. You've got like a Cats thing already. You did a Cats.
yeah.
cartoon.
That was actually the Cats animation I did. Are You Going to Try for a Different Life? Was my first grease pencil animation in Blender. That was the first grease pencil.
Okay.
one. I think the Clown Planet What I'll say, I can say this because there's a real life reason as to why I made them obsessed with Cats. But I would say the in-universe reason is that Cats the musical is like this biblical thing. If you watch it from a certain angle, it really looks like you could build a whole religion around this musical.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they did. Of course, it needs to be noted, it's not Cats.
Yeah.
It's a completely different musical that happens to be identical. But it's not Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cats, because that would be stealing. And also wouldn't make sense, right? This was made 9 billion years ago.
Yeah.
Exactly. This is a different thing that happens to have the same music.
Back off, Weber.
Yeah, get away from me. I'm honestly surprised because I use music from Cats. I mean, it's my own arrangement, but I use a theme from Cats in Big Top Burger Up. And I really was like, am I going to get flagged? Will YouTube be like, that's the Jellicle ball from Up?
Yeah.
I mean, from Cats. They didn't spot it. They still haven't spotted it. I'm like, whatever. If you're not going to spot it, I'm not going to get rid of it. So...
And also, even if they do spot it, you can't be blamed. You can only blame the imaginary other studio that made the video. So
their
hands
crimes are just racking up.
Yeah.
They are in a lot of trouble. I'd love to think that Andrew Lloyd Webber at some point just failed to fill out some paperwork, and it's actually, it belongs to the world.
I think that's true. It should belong to the world. Cats should be public domain now.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the other one that's Cats but trains?
Oh, yeah, Starlight Express. I've never seen it. I know about it.
No one has, but
No one has.
But everyone's like, do you know there's Cats with trains?
And they roller skate.
Oh yeah.
And I think it is inspired by Thomas and Friends to some degree. Maybe that's a lie. I feel like I've heard that.
This is new to me. Is it the Cats are also trains, or it's set on trains?
It's the idea is, you know, the way Cats is a musical about talking, singing cats. Andrew Lloyd Webber also did that with trains.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying there was another Cats thing. But in this, they were trains.
It's just one of Webber's lesser known works.
You made it after Cats, yeah.
Maybe he's not coming after you for the Cats copyright because he knows he's guilty of ripping off Thomas and Friends. So he doesn't want to make waves. He's like, let them have their fun. People can make mistakes like that all the time. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal.
I remember when I was choosing to put the Jellicle ball arrangement in, I did that partly because it felt resonant for me. I'm like, this is a melody actually from Cats. It's not my own thing, and so that it felt resonant to me. But I was also like, I want to kind of put my foot down a little. That like, obviously this is not a real show. This is indie animation on YouTube. But sometimes it doesn't feel like I'm leaning into that enough. I'm not leaning into the history of indie animation, which is like, you just steal stuff sometimes because you're not on TV. You can do whatever you want. And I was like, I want to do something like that. I want to just take something, and I took it, but it's not real. It's not on TV. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's internet content. The way you just steal stuff.
Yeah. Someone asked Nezumin6 on Instagram, asked from what you can remember, what was your first idea that motivated you into posting online at all, like whether it be videos or drawings, or do you remember like crossing that line?
Yes, I do. I think I was 15 years old. I posted stuff before that, but it wasn't drawings. I'd posted little video games made in Game Maker, like side-scroller games, and I didn't draw anything. I used sprites from other games, so it was different. But I would post stuff there, and then I was on the forums for Game Maker, and people had these threads on the forums where they were like, make sprites for my game, like, let's collaborate. They wouldn't pay you or anything. It was just like, let's make some sprites. And so I started drawing little animations, little pixel art animations on the computer, and like just giving it to people because it was like a fun thing to do. And I did that for a while, and I remember they just started getting bigger. I was like, well, I'll make one it's still pixels, but it's more like lines, like big lines. It was, it went from like whatever 128 to like 256, and then a little bit bigger. And then eventually I moved over to Flash, and I started posting stuff on YouTube. One of the first things I posted on my YouTube channel is now unlisted, is a trailer for one of the games that me and my brother made. It was an anime fighting game where you play as all the different Shonen Jump anime characters and you fight each other. And we made a little trailer that's footage from the game set to like one of those epic orchestra songs that were huge in the like 2010s, like "Oh Fortuna," like
oh yeah.
Like
I thought you were gonna say it was
epic
"Let
songs.
the bodies hit the floor." That's that. I'm really glad that's your answer because I love when it's like something you did when you were like 15. That was like, oh, it was just some stupid little thing I did. But like those are always the things that like break that seal of like feeling comfortable with sharing something you made.
Then I was like, well, now I have this YouTube channel. Maybe I'll post some other stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's also fun that when people tell you about their very first thing like that around those age, it's always the most bombastic, epic thing. It's like Goku's blowing up planets. We've got Oh Fortuna. It's just we've got Battle of the Fates is playing as well.
Layer it in.
Yeah, and Yoda's getting absolutely jacked and just punching the hell out of everybody. And it's it's the most no holds barred. And then everything after that is this slow, like, calm down.
I'm sure one of the bits of roll text in your trailer was over 1,000 playable characters, and you're like, I can do it. I can make them all. It'll be fine.
And I want someday we're going to hear about someone in their 80s who, one of those stories where you hear they only started getting into this in the later years, but it was great for their great hobby for them. Someone in their 80s is going to make one of these. Every Dragon Ball Z character, every character from every game ever in the greatest clash of titans, and every character from Jackass is in it.
This reminds me of an anecdote that I was reminded of recently by my brother. He made me remember this, that one of the characters we wanted to put in the game as an unlockable character was L from Death Note. So my brother watched Death Note like L. Now here's the problem. L is not, at that time, a playable character in Jump, Ultimate Stars, or Superstars, any of these like side-scroller DS fighting games with sprites. Yeah. He's an assist. So there aren't enough sprites of L to make him a playable character. So what I did is I made a tiny little 3D model in Blender shaped like the sprite, and then I projected the sprite onto the model, and then I could animate the model so it looked like the sprite was moving around, and I rendered those out at the same scale so they get kind of crushed down. And my brother was reminding me, I was like, I guess I've been doing the same shtick since I was like,
I was going to say, that's exactly what you're doing now, basically.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Does this exist now in any form?
The trailer? I mean, I could relist it if people want to watch it, I guess. Or the game.
Just the more you talk about this, I think the more there's going to be a hunger
to see
for
it.
This because
it's not much.
I want it
now. I could make the game available. It's like a .exe, and people could check it out, I guess. It is a full game with, I forget how many, like 10 characters or something.
That's a lot.
I can already see the YouTube thumbnails. Worthikids hidden game?
Yeah.
Just all these like lost game.
The
by
name
who?
of this is important. The name of the video game is Papa Rocks. Now, do you know Papa Rocks?
No.
Papa
like
Rocks.
Pop Rocks?
Like Pop Rocks. It's the name of a character from the anime Boba Bo 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 Boba Bo.
Oh, I know.
Only in the manga. In the anime, he's called Don Patch, but in the English translation of the manga, they call him Papa Rocks for some reason. I don't know why. It's some translation thing. And so we called the game Papa Rocks, because he is a playable character in the game, obviously. We loved Boba.
So I love that it almost like you wanted to make a game about him, and then you're kind of like, we might as well put Goku in here, but it's still just called Papa Rocks.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Right.
It's like if
if
Super Smash Brothers was called Captain Olimar.
Yeah. That's the name of the game.
Yeah. You've unlocked that memory now of like when people used to make fighting game rosters. And like the art styles were just completely... They were just grabbing like promotional images of characters. Like, so it'd be a sprite of Mario next to Master Chief, like a fully rendered Master Chief.
Yeah.
And then some Gears of War guy. Incredible.
I love that. I have so much love for fighting games, even though I barely play them. I'm not much of a gamer. I'm not really a gamer, but I just love the image of a roster where you see all the heads,
you're like, oh,
and you
cool.
see, and the unlockable ones where it's like, oh, it's like grayed out. It's the coolest thing in the world.
I guess we're coming a little bit towards wrapping things up because I'm really hungry and I want my dinner. Oh, I don't know if you know that about me.
I thought you meant because we've done the hour, but
But also no,
I'm hungry.
I meant we've done the hour. But Ian, one of the segments on the podcast that never works, but we're committing to it, is we have these. I'll show you. We have these oblique strategy cards, which were designed by Brian Eno and Peter Schmidt. Basically, when he was making some of his albums with David Bowie in '78 or something like that, they invented these cards, and the idea is that you pull a card and it just says something on it, and it's meant to be when you've got creatively you're running out of ideas. It's just a prompt to make you think of something. What we decided to do in the podcast is just pull oblique strategy cards, read them out to the person, and just get them to talk about whatever comes into their head. And maybe 3 times we've had some really good ones, and a lot of the time it's like,
that's generous.
Yeah. So
everyone so far has done, I will say, for the record,
very good job.
They've done the best they could under extremely difficult circumstances.
Okay.
So
here's a good one. I've pulled a really good one. This might be one of the best ones you've ever gotten. So this card says, "Do nothing for as long as possible." Now, if you were working on something and you just completely hit a wall creatively, you pull that card. What's sparked in your head?
I would say it's already part of my routine, and that does work very, very well. I got it from, I think, Neil Gaiman. It's this idea that if you need to work but you don't feel like working, what you should do is sit in your work area with like the thing open. He writes obviously, but I have like Blender open, and all I need to do is do nothing or work. So the options are, I sit here, I can't look at social media, I can't eat, I can't distract myself. I have to sit here and do nothing. Usually I'll do like 1 hour. Sit here and do nothing for an hour, or work on the project. And very quickly I'm like, I don't feel like working. I'm not feeling juiced. I'll sit there and be like, whoa, this is boring. Oh, I need to work more. It's just like, I need to do something. This is so boring. Like, I need to fill this hour. Okay, I'll work. And then I'm into it. It works really well.
That's
nice.
That's perfect. Like, that's exactly what Brian Eno wanted when he made these cards and charged €70. How much was it? Pretty expensive.
They cost more than they should. But at the same time, you might make one of the world's greatest albums by pulling one of these cards.
True.
Exactly.
Maybe.
By doing nothing, in fact.
Do I now have to try
if you want
to
wrap things up? That's our other consistent feature of the podcast scene, is that we do a really terrible job of wrapping up. So we generally ask you what you want to say, and then make a bunch of noises, and then we fade out with some music fading in.
We should
really
stop.
cool.
We should stop beating ourselves up and start just putting the pressure on our guest, and just be like, "All right, Ian, take us home."
Okay, I'll wrap it up. Well, I was gonna say look forward to my next animation, but it's probably gonna be done this Saturday, so people will already have seen that one, I guess. So now
you can say, "I hope you all enjoyed."
I hope you enjoyed the new animation. And there's another one on the way. Oh.
I know we're risking just continuing on with the podcast here. I'm dragging us backwards rather than forwards. A question I would have is, with your animation, you've tried several different approaches to it, and like you end up with these different looks.
Yeah.
In the future, do you see that happening more, or do you think you're kind of like locking into a look, or are you going to continue to try completely different things?
This next animation, which the audience has probably already seen, is in a completely new style. I'm using new tech in Blender, and I'm trying something completely different. So,
oh, nice,
amazing.
We'll see how people react to it. I guess I'll know that in the future.
You've projected your actual live action face onto every character.
That's right. I went with that technique.
Well, Ian, thanks so much for hanging out, and thanks for talking to us. And
thank you for having me. Great, interesting questions. A great conversation.
Ian, Worthikids, thank you so much for joining us on the Studio Meala podcast. And Sean, thank you. I know you weren't feeling 100% tonight,
Really
but you
sick.
powered
I'm
through
really sick.
really well. And I know you were hungry for the
I'm really
last
hungry as well.
couple of minutes, and that must have been tough as well. Listeners, thank you for joining us. Please continue to support Worthikids, continue to support Studio Meala, continue to support independent animation worldwide. It's the greatest thing in the world. Let's just... Oh God, there's the music. Oh God, come.
Oh, do one thing for us, Ian, while we're still recording. Go really close to the microphone and just do a voice, because you're really good at doing voices like this sometimes.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope you had a good time. There's going to be more podcasts coming soon. Thank you.
That cut it. I don't think we should even have the music in that episode. Just cutting that. All right.
Thank you so much.